it was like just zero to hero kind of,
Wow.
montage of my life. I'm like I'm traveling the world. People are flying me all over to teach at conferences and workshops specifically on spiritual intelligence, and I'm like loving it, and also
Of
just honing my
course.
craft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, and
awesome.
so all that was going on, and eventually it got to the point where I like wasn't having those radical experiences with God anymore, like it got kind of quiet over there, and I'm just over here like crushing it at my career of being a professional Christian. And then one day, I watched Miss Americana, Taylor Swift's documentary on Netflix, and she goes hard on advocating for gay rights in that movie randomly, and something hit me. Like I had this, like again, like a spiritual conviction, I guess, is what I would say. And then there was a series of those kinds of experiences after that that ultimately led
Mm.
me to coming out of the closet. And then, so from that process, there was a lot of grieving because I knew I was about to blow up my career, and I was
Welcome to the Queer Quest podcast, your beacon of light and sprinkle of glitter in the queer community. I'm your host, 𝐄𝐩𝐢𝐬𝐤𝐸, CEO and founder of Queer Quest and a transformation coach for queer individuals. And together, we're embarking on a journey of transformation. Each week, we bring you a new training topic or connect you with visionary queer leaders in healing and coaching, diving deep into conversations that inspire growth, celebrate diversity, and empower you to live authentically. So wherever you are, settle in and let's get ready to unlock the vibrant potential within. This is where your quest begins. Hello, you fabulous souls, and welcome to this week's episode of the Queer Quest podcast. I'm your host, 𝐄𝐩𝐢𝐬𝐤𝐸, and this week on the podcast, we have a very special guest. We've got Mike Maeshiro here today, who is a gay pastor and a life coach for queer and deconstructing Christians. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Mike.
thanks for having me, Cristiano. I'm excited to be here.
Glad to
Um,
hear that.
yeah. So I want to chime in on the whole pastor thing. For the record, I am not currently vocationally a pastor at a church anywhere. I don't think I'm ever gonna play that role again, but I do hold the title socially, especially on social media, so people have a grid for context for the kind of work that I do, and also giving them permission to pull from my work in that way, because I think a big part of my audience is people recovering from, religious backgrounds, especially evangelicals. And so if they recognize that title, it'll help them give them permission to just like ask the questions and pull from, the work that I'm doing in an easy way. So it more serves a purpose than it is a title, but yeah.
Thanks for making that clear, Mike. I think that's probably good for the audience to understand as we jump into this episode today.
Yeah.
So, Mike, you've got a big following on social media, and I'm assuming that part of that might have been from your, as you said, what you've just referenced as a gay pastor. You used to be in the church. You've understood that there's a lot of kind of, trauma that happens for a lot of queer people growing up in that. So I'd love to maybe start and just maybe share a little bit about your journey, like growing up in the church and what led you to initially working there and whatnot. It's probably a lot to share, but jump in and share that with us.
Okay. Yeah, great. So, I mean, I was 4 years old when my parents took me to church for the first time. It was a Baptist church. And I was told in that first Sunday school class, the evangelical gospel, which is horrific, by the way. It's a turn or burn message, like accept Jesus into your heart, or you're going to go to hell and burn for eternity. And so I had to learn a lot of new words at 4 in that initial Sunday school experience. And I got scared into the evangelical club. I got saved. I invited Jesus into my heart to forgive me and like save me and be my Lord and Savior. And I meant it, like I fully immersed myself in that world and like drank deeply of the theology and ethos and worldview and all that. And so, went to private school and like memorized passages of scripture for a grade and just became a really good Christian boy. I was really good at it. And then, was gay that whole time. And when I was 10, I finally realized consciously like, oh, I'm gay. And that was like a horrifying moment for me because I knew that I was an
Everything you'd heard
illegal.
was
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
was
Like
oh
I had been, preached of multiple times by that point that gay people were the worst, like they were abominations. They wouldn't inherit the kingdom. They were, worshiping Satan. They were deceived. They're perverts, like all this horrible stuff about people like me. So that was obviously like a really painful and
he's
terrifying
10 years
experience.
old as well, right?
Yeah. And yeah, at such a young age, it's wild to just think back to that. But anyway, so fast forward, I was 18 and kind of jaded with Christianity a little bit. I'm like, this is kind of boring. Like, what are we doing? Like, what are we even offering the world? And then someone shared a story in an adult Sunday school class I was in about a Christian film like who had a gay actor as their male lead, and they didn't know he was gay. And he came
Uh,
out to them in the middle of the production of the film, and they decided, like, they prayed and felt like God wanted him to play the role. So she shared that story as like this positive, happy, whatever. And we were in a very conservative evangelical church. So like it was crickets in the room. People were not comfortable with what she just said. And I especially was like, what are you doing? And then an hour later, my life changed. I had no idea this was going to happen, but I was in the worship service like an hour later, and just had a radical spiritual experience. In my retelling of this, I say that I met God. I don't, depending on who's listening, I don't feel the need for people to agree that God exists, and that's what my experience was. But from my subjective perspective, I encountered a being, an entity, a presence of incredible love and kindness and humility that loved me, and it was a lot. And I just had never had an experience like that before. And I didn't know until years later. I think the precursor to that experience was that woman sharing that story about that gay guy, because that was the first time in my life I'd ever heard God being gracious toward a gay person. So that blew my mind and like
mm,
shifted something in my soul that I didn't even know was like so hard and like closed off. And so anyway, it always, growing up in church, being as committed to the whole thing as I was, being a pastor or like a speaker, a preacher, always seemed like the pinnacle of like the best thing I could do. And so I just strove to like trying to find my way into that kind of position and that kind of work. So I ended up going on a spiritual pilgrimage because I had a few more experiences like that where I don't know, had these deep radical spiritual experiences with who I understood God to be.
yeah.
And they were changing me as a person. Like, like they were changing how I showed up and how I saw the world and how I saw people. I was so sensitive and exposed and like malleable to like grace and compassion and empathy and forgiveness and just seeing the beauty in people. Like it was changing me. And I was a basket case for months. I just couldn't stop crying all the time. I just was, going through this
And
really
were you out at the time, or was this still like you're
no, 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 no. I wasn't
yeah.
even. I was so deeply closeted. Um, I had told a couple of friends that I struggled with being attracted to men. It was like this.
The
I
inkling
don't
of the,
even.
the first thing you would, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So no, I was not out in any way. And so I went on a pilgrimage of sorts, which I moved to Japan for 6 months to be part of a missions organization. And then when I came back, I had a few more of these radical experiences. I don't know why. I had several of them, which landed me in Redding, California, at a ministry school called Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. So I went there. Yeah, I went there to do school. I did first and second year there. I actually got kicked out of school on the last day because somebody outed me. And that was like a really strange, kind of traumatizing experience for me. And through a long story short, I ended up like following through with that and confronting what happened. They apologized, cleaned it up. I ended up teaching at the school that kicked me out, on the gift of discernment, and my class kind of blew up. And I also was starting to get quoted by one of the major leaders of this church. And this is like an
Wow.
internationally known, recognized global brand. Bethel was like huge in the is sorry, is still huge in the charismatic stream of Christianity. So I was at the hub of, like the best place in my mind that I could possibly be like developing as a Christian leader. I was there and I was like experiencing all of this promotion and favor and opportunity. And so I'm getting quoted by this huge dude. I'm developing an Instagram following. I'm teaching this class and my notoriety just keeps growing. I was on the online streaming platform as like the announcements guy. So people are recognizing me all over. It was like wild. Then I started getting
How
invited
long
to
how long
travel.
ago was this? Like put a picture of that, like is
This
it
was
5 years,
like,
10 years, 20,
oh, this is like probably 10 years ago.
10 years ago?
Yeah. So, but and it lasted for like, I don't know, 8 years. It just like kept getting bigger and bigger and having more and more fun and being more and more
Yeah.
successful and making more and more money and having a bigger and bigger like platform. It was like just zero to hero kind of,
Wow.
montage of my life. I'm traveling the world. People are flying me all over to teach at conferences and workshops specifically on spiritual intelligence. And I'm like loving it, and also
Of
just honing
course.
my craft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. And
awesome.
so all that was going on. And eventually it got to the point where I like wasn't having those radical experiences with God anymore, like it got kind of quiet over there and I'm just over here like crushing it at my career of being a professional Christian. And then one day I watched Miss Americana, Taylor Swift's documentary on Netflix, and she goes hard on advocating for gay rights in that movie randomly, and something hit me. Like I had this again, like a spiritual conviction, I guess is what I would say. And then there was a series of those kinds of experiences after that that ultimately led me to coming out of the closet. And then, so from that process, there was a lot of grieving because I knew I was about to blow up my career and I was going to throw everything away that I had just built, and all the beautiful, amazing things that happened in my life were about to disappear, like including the relationships, like these people that I had built,
Really close
professional,
relationships. Yeah.
professional network, personal support, community, like best friends, like that stuff. I was like, I'm about to lose most of this, if not all of it, right? So I took the risk and came out to some close friends. Thankfully, some of the closest people to me like stuck with me through this process, but the rest of it went up in flames. Like I lost it all, and it was really painful and sad. And I just was so grieved to watch the hypocrisy and the cold-hearted, agenda-driven, biased responses from these human beings who had known me for years, and they just turned. It was shocking.
Yeah.
I was like, this is unreal. Like this is dehumanizing and shocking. And like, I can't believe this is going on. Like, I can't believe it's happening to me, like I'm not just some rando,
Yeah,
who just
because
blew in here out of town. Like
yeah.
I've been here for years, and I've been public, and I've been consistent, and I've produced incredible results, and I have all these accolades, and you turned on me like that. This is crazy, like, so that was a really eye-opening experience. And I came out swinging, and I was like, I can't just pretend like this didn't happen. And I'm not going to walk away from this knowing there are tons of people like me, groomed and reared and indoctrinated in this whole system of belief that is dehumanizing and harmful. And so that process led me down a whole deconstruction journey that like radically altered my theology. And anyway, that's how we got here.
Oh, wow. And so you said 10 years ago was when you got initially outed, but then you went through discernment, and then it was only a couple of years ago that you actually properly came out, and that's when you kind of got shunned by everyone. Is that kind of the timeline?
I got properly outed in 2011.
Okay.
And then went through like a dark moping period, and then got hired on staff at that church like 6 months later. And then a couple of years later, started teaching at the school, and then started growing. So 10 years of like success and upward mobility. Yeah. So like 13 years ago, I was outed, and then there were a couple of years of turnaround, and then, it kind of popped off. And then, so then me coming out, I came out to myself in 2020, and I came out publicly on all my platforms in 2022.
Okay, wow. So it's been a big journey for you then. So a lot of pushing things down, a lot of repression, oppression of how you feel and how you see yourself, and then believing that what kind of like Christianity and God is going to save you because you're doing the work as a good Christian boy. Like what do you, how do you see that picture reflecting on it now?
Yeah. So I guess I left something out that's kind of important. Most of these deeply spiritual experiences that I had referenced, I was experiencing the voice of God or whatever, this presence or whatever in my life. They were affirming me as a gay person. Like they were advocating for me in my own being. And I was like, what are you talking? Like I was so uncomfortable, and I pushed away that notion, even though it felt incredible to be affirmed and to be loved and accepted and embraced on that level with God. And again, I'm putting air quotes on this, like interpret it how you need to, but like with God, it was beautiful, and yet so contrary to everything I'd been taught and my theology and the leadership that I was under and the community I was part of. Like it just contradicted all of it, because there was such an anti-gay rhetoric in the theology I was raised in, which is true for most evangelicals. So that's why it took years for me to finally say yes, because like I was having these deeply spiritual experiences nudging me out of the closet, coaxing me, lovingly like inviting me to choose myself and to love and affirm myself. And I couldn't do it because of all the, what it would cost. And then eventually it was like, the cost is becoming greater to not do this than what I'll give up to. So I made that choice, and it was really dramatic and painful. And so anyway, I just wanted to clarify that. Then I think you asked me a question like, how do I see all of it now?
So how do you see that throughout the years of, like I said, parts of yourself were being repressed and oppressed, but now that you've left kind of all of that behind you and you've moved into this kind of next phase of your life and you're openly gay, how do you look back and see that time because of course you were the good Christian boy back then, But like,
Yeah.
how do you see that now, reflecting back on it?
Yeah. I mean, God, yeah, it was like I was living in an internment camp. It was hell. I didn't know it at the time because I didn't know how oppressed I was. I didn't know how like homophobic I was toward me,
Towards
right? Like I
yourself,
didn't
yeah,
know,
internalized homophobia, yeah.
yeah, like just the debased level of acceptance and social engagement I was allowing myself to have. There was so much about my own humanity I ignored and overrode and just like embraced the cognitive dissonance to survive because I didn't have any other options. Like there was safety was not a luxury I ever got to like consider or like demand, let alone, right? Like I couldn't do that. That was not on the table for me. And it took me a while, of when I started doing the work of coming out, I just went hard and just got a bunch of books and watched a ton of videos and listened to a bunch of podcasts and like started seeking out these voices and having conversations with them and building relationships with people who are affirming queer people because I needed to change my theology. I'm like, I am missing something. And so through all of that, yeah, like I just learned so many things I was not allowed to know. There's so much gatekeeping in the Christian world I was raised in. There were books that you weren't allowed to read. In terms of like, you could read them, you just, if anybody found out, there would be some repercussions, there'd be some backlash and you would like be punished socially. They wouldn't tell you that, but that would absolutely happen. And so there was a whole built-in system to gatekeep what you were allowed to think and believe and what kind of ideas you were allowed to entertain. So I started breaking the rules and like learning, and my mind opened and I started changing in my own eyes, like who I was, what I deserved, what I was worthy of, like it just started to unfold. And then I started getting really angry.
Of course.
Like I could not believe how long I had let myself be treated this way and how long my whole environment and community was content to treat people like me like that. I was so angry. I'm like, this is not okay. This is wrong. This is unjust. This is unethical. This is violating. This is harmful. This is torturous. Like this is really bad. And we're doing this in the name of God. We're doing this like because of the Bible. This is insane. So I did the work and was like, yeah, we are reading this book incorrectly. We are interpreting it incorrectly. There's a ton of agenda and propaganda that comes to how we interpret the Bible
The
and apply it
Bible.
to people's lives. So much overreaching, so much power imbalance. Like the dynamic between like authority figures in the church and everyone else is there's such a lack of accountability. And, you're kind of groomed to be like this submitted, passive, kind of disempowered party in relation to like leaders of churches. And it's very exploitative. And I don't think these people are villains or they're not evil or malicious, but the system itself is problematic. And people just kind of fall into the different positions that are available and then enact these harmful practices and relational dynamics. It's really like twisted and not okay. So all that kind of came to a light in a short period of time, and I just started gunning through the process and like getting really mad and like having to go to town on my own existing relationships and like establishing necessary boundaries to find what safety even could look like for me in the midst of
Wow.
all of these harmful relationships I've been engaging in for years. And so many of them didn't understand. They were shocked. They were like, "You're being dramatic. You're overreacting." Whatever. Like all the and
Throwing
then
your career away, all of that stuff,
sure,
right?
yeah. Like, what about all the stuff I've done for you? How can you just like throw me away? I'm like, I'm not throwing you away. I need you to change your theology because your theology actively right now is dehumanizing me, and I'm not doing that anymore. And they just couldn't get it. They were like, they would like attack my verbiage and try and renegotiate the terms and like figure out how they could possibly still dehumanize queer people in their theology and stay friends with me. And I'm like, that's not on the table for me. And so many of them kicking and screaming would not accept that. And it was really, and I'm still not even done with some of those conversations. I don't know how to find closure with them because there's just so much gaslighting that happens and they don't even realize they're doing it. It is wild.
It's just
It is
because
a
of what you said was everyone's groomed, right? In the
Yeah, like just indoctrinated to interpret all this stuff in a certain way. And in the 80s, when like conservative evangelical Christianity and the right-wing Republican Party of American politics merged, that never undid. It has only gotten worse, which is why we're seeing this MAGA Trump crazy in America. We're not just talking theology anymore. It also bleeds into social dynamics. It bleeds into politics. It bleeds into the kind of citizen you are, what definitions of love and goodness are even like those definitions start changing depending on your convictions in this. And my community started becoming more and more foreign and I felt more and more betrayed in real time by the people I had known for years. And I'm like, we are the villains in this story. This is crazy. It was
Believe
like a
it.
really rude awakening, and it was shocking and like a nightmare, you know? And I woke up every day in it for a long time, and I was like, I have to get out. Anyway, I don't even know if I'm answering your question anymore, but yeah.
I forgot what the question was, but you definitely I think you definitely answered it because I no longer have the question. um, so you came out in 2020. Now you've again like left the church. What is your take and your view on religion as a whole, going through that experience and also then going through the experience of coming out and having like being pretty much shunned and kicked out, and
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. So I technically left that physical church community in 2021. I didn't come out publicly until 2022. I am actually at this point in time, at the recording of this, I am on staff with a progressive Christian church in Nashville.
okay,
Um, it's a part-time thing. I'm partnered with them. I think what they're doing is important and
that's good.
beautiful. And so here's, I don't know, this is like I'm going to try and give you a short answer. Here is what I think about religion at this point, specifically Christianity. I think the human psyche needs mythology and ideas to grapple with, to grab onto. We need an answer for why and where and how. Like, we just need those gaps filled. And unfortunately, many of us in the evangelical world, those gaps get filled very early before our brains have even developed to think critically, to ask questions, to challenge our notions, right? Like, we're just being told
Conditioned
empirically this is
before 7 years of age, you get all those
right.
rooted beliefs,
That was
conditioning.
me,
Yeah,
yeah. So empirical reality is getting defined for you in a very specific and oppressive way in evangelicalism, right? And so then you just kind of learn how to build your worldview and your ethos around these tenets of the faith. I'm putting that in massive air quotes because it is an iteration. I would say it's a mutant deformity of what Christianity used to be, in my opinion. So anyway, that's a huge like desire and need that I think a lot of people find solace and comfort in. And I don't want to denounce or like disparage the appreciation for faith. I think I still consider myself genuinely like a person of faith. There are still things I can't explain that I believe. I can't justify or prove, but I also can't disprove them. So like there are things in my spirituality I still hold as sacred and valuable. There is so much about my theology that I have thrown in the garbage. I'm like, that is not real. That is not true. That is inflated, exaggerated, propagandized, like made up stuff that we use the Bible to justify claiming this thing is a thing. And there's so many things like that I don't agree with anymore, that are like not a small deal. Like they're a big deal in Christianity. It's to the point where people don't think I'm a Christian anymore. Like they will hear some of my beliefs and be like, "You're not a
yes,
Christian." I'm like,
yes.
okay, but you don't get to tell me that. Like you don't own Christianity. You're not the arbiter, you know? Like but the thing is, like, I do still have such a massive appreciation for Jesus, this person, this Christ figure. I don't believe we need a savior. I don't believe people are like sinners, you know, destined for hell. I don't believe that hell is a place anyone's going to. I don't believe. So there's so much about that stuff I don't agree with. I understand where they came from and how we got where we are. There's still so much problematic stuff in it now that I think we're actually accountable to, that the church is continuously ignoring. But I think there's so much about Jesus' life and work that still is incredibly relevant today. Um, Loving your enemies, forgiving people, the indwelling nature of the divine within each person, the equity that's like owed to all persons, flipping power on its head. Like there's so much that Jesus brought to the table that was revolutionary at his time that now is still incredibly relevant. Like we still have not learned these lessons as a species. And I'm like, I don't want to just throw this person away and this beautiful like example and like call just because people have really royally screwed this up. Like I want to do the labor. I don't want to. I feel compelled to do the labor of separating what's beautiful and profound and inspirational and powerful about the life and message of the person of Jesus, and then all the garbage and crazy and the made up stuff, the literalism that got, turned into this whitewashing, oppressive, imperialist, colonizing nightmare. Yeah, it's a lot of work to separate. And I just
Definitely,
see a
definitely.
ton. Yeah, and I see a ton of victims still trapped in the evangelical ethos because they don't know any better and they're not allowed to know any better. And I would like to use my voice and one of the ways that I want to use it for is like to help give them a place to breathe, give them a poke a hole through that like chamber they're trapped in, and give them a chance to like consider something else. Because what they've been taught is the gospel truth is, in my opinion, is not from an academic level. It's not. So anyway,
Nice.
I'm sorry. That's my answer, I guess, right now. I could
You
say
did
more, but
answer my question for sure, and we're going to take a quick break now. But I want to come back and talk about that, because I think, you know, what you're referring to is, you know, the parts of the Bible that are made up in a sense to control people and to have people follow an indoctrinated, you know, view of life by whoever created the Bible. But then there's also the part of it, as you said, which is the life of Jesus that actually has some meaning and thing for it. So we'll take a quick break and we'll come back and we'll jump into that there.
right.
In a world where every journey is unique, one path shines brightly for the queer community. Introducing QueerQuest, the first of its kind personal development platform designed exclusively for us, by us. At QueerQuest, we understand the multifaceted journey of queer identity. That's why we've created a space where you can explore, learn, and grow with the guidance of queer experts from around the globe. Whether you're seeking to enhance your physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual well-being, QueerQuest is your gateway to transformation. Imagine embarking on quests tailored to your journey of self-discovery, finding community, and unlocking your queer excellence. QueerQuest offers online courses, coaching programs, and soon workshops, seminars, retreats, and festivals, all designed to empower you to live your best life. Ready to start your adventure? Join us at www.queerquest.vip to become part of a movement towards personal and collective greatness. Sign up today to join the waitlist and be the first to know when we launch. QueerQuest, where your journey of self-discovery and transformation begins. Don't just dream of a life filled with pride and purpose, make it your reality with QueerQuest. Visit www.queerquest.vip now. Your quest awaits.
Awesome. And we are back here, and we were just having a deep conversation. And I said before the break that we were going to talk a little bit about your view on the Bible, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So like, I know that's a huge topic. And I like to throw these at you because I feel like we're getting some really good stuff from you when I just put you on the spot. So give me what you feel about the Bible and, like, you know, its words and what you feel is relevant to your beliefs and your theology, and what is kind of like really causing oppression.
Right. Love it. First of all, I just want to acknowledge, Cristiano, I appreciate the audacity of your questions. It's like, I don't know that there are a ton of interviews I've done where people ask me these questions, and the conversation is great. So I want to try and tackle it. I also want to acknowledge, when it comes to the Bible, I am saying things out loud in a condensed and crude fashion because I had to fight and hunt and search and pay and like labor to find these answers from a lot of really intelligent, well-read, experienced people who don't say this stuff publicly because it can easily be taken out of context. It can be misconstrued or whatever. And I think I'm like doing a service to the community by saying the quiet parts out loud
100%.
because I had to like, it was a lot of work to get to these answers, but I'm like, we need to know this. This is helpful and important. So I think I'm trying to just like lower the information, get it to a lower shelf so more people can access it. So
yeah,
I'm going to say stuff that can easily be taken out of context. I want to acknowledge I understand that up front. I'm taking the risk anyway. Handle this material with caution, engage with it at your own discretion. Here we go. All right. So the Bible, let's just lay on the table. This is not a book. It's a library of books, 66 different books put together, right? These books were written over a span of 1,500 years by 42-ish authors, depending on who you're citing for your historical facts, at different points in that 1,500 years, right? Like, this is not one cohesive, linear piece of work. It's not a monolithic message as evangelicalism wants it to be and claims that it is. That's not historically or academically true. That is false. You have to propagandize your way into that idea. You have to create superstition and an echo chamber and a culture that reinforces this mandated interpretation in order to maintain that belief pattern and interpretation of the book, of the library of books. But that's not what scholars and academics and historians find when these experts study these texts, for the record, okay? So when I look at the Bible, I don't see the inerrant, infallible, authoritative word of God. I'm putting all that in quotes because that's how I was taught to relate to this collection of books. Um, evangelicalism treats the Bible like it's God's voice in written form. There's a bibliolatry to it, which is, like this term of like worshiping the Bible, turning the Bible into its own deity, which the Bible itself says not to do, for the record. And so there's this nasty elevation of not even the Bible, but of people's interpretations of these ancient texts, and they become God's voice, God's
Yeah.
word, God's authority. So now God's voice becomes a weaponized tool in the hands of an oppressor who is bigoted and has an agenda and is now wielding this, dare we say, sacred weapon against people who, they don't like, who are different from them. They target and scapegoat all kinds of different kinds of people in order to justify their own like harmful worldviews, to make themselves feel more comfortable. There are lots of reasons behind it. And I know these reasons because I used to do it. I was part of
Yeah.
that group. As horrible as this is, like I get it because I did it for a long time and it's nasty. And it was a lot for me to be willing to admit that and let it go. It did cost me a lot. So I get why people don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But that was the ethical choice I had to make in order to course correct, because what we're doing is harmful to people. It is
Mm-hmm.
the opposite of love. It's the opposite of care. It's the opposite of service or humility. It's the opposite of all these things that Jesus called his disciples to be like, like how they're supposed to embody their work in the world. This is the opposite of that. And these are the people who are claiming to have the corner market on the book. Like, it's crazy. So, okay.
Really? Yeah.
We've got a bunch of people who wrote down their thoughts about the divine, about cosmology, about human life and nature, right? And they wrote them down and passed it on. These people who contributed to the works of the Bible were Jewish. They were Israelites, right? Like, they had a specific ethnocentric view and they were speaking
Wow.
to their particular people group. They weren't talking to everyone for all of time about everything. They were talking to their unique, specific community about their specific God to address their specific journey as a people, having gone through a lot of harmful, oppressive experiences themselves as a nation.
Yeah.
That's a lot of context that evangelicalism doesn't seem to care about in a lot of ways. Like, that stuff doesn't always get held in appropriate tension, and things get taught from a literalist interpretation from these words from this ancient community of people. And then it gets applied to like 2024. It's unbelievable this is still happening. It's so ignorant. And I feel fine about it. I clearly. Anyway,
I love it.
so
No, you go. You keep going. I'm loving it.
so from all this, I look at what these people have written down and I can appreciate from an historical and literary place, like, hey, I see what you're saying and where you're coming from. I get why you said that. That's helpful. Great. Appreciate it. Glad we still have this. We can like evaluate it and pull things of meaning or value in proper context, right? Whatever. But to treat this collection of writings like an authoritative manuscript of like a manual on how life is supposed to be lived and what people are allowed to experience and not, is so harmful and ignorant, that it like, I'm not going to finish that sentence. It's just very
Full
harmful.
stop, period. It's harmful.
Done. Yeah,
ignorant.
the end. Done. Which should give us pause and should cause us to go back to the drawing board and try again, because this isn't it, right? Unfortunately, the people who are being confronted for doing these things tend to double down on what they're being confronted about and just go harder on it and justify further how and why what they're saying is true is true. And it's wild. Like, the lack of empathy, the lack of like humanizing other people, the other, from people who claim to understand the Bible, have missed some pretty fundamental messages that are the pinnacle of where this journey has gone in this collection of writings. So I see the Bible as, spiritual ancestors having written down their thoughts, their best, most compiled thoughts about the nature of
Over
God.
1,500 years of time,
Yeah.
which is very different time than it is in 2024, as you said, right?
Right. And the thoughts also change as the texts themselves get added. Like, the ideas around God start to evolve and change. So when you start in some of the older texts and then you get to some of the more recent ones, what they believe about God is different. Like, there was an idea about God that first of all, God is a he throughout the entire text, because it's an incredibly patriarchal context, right? Like,
Yes,
everyone that contributed to this book, this collection of books, was deeply like drowned in a patriarchal society, and it was tribal, right? In a lot of ways. So
Tribal,
anyway,
yeah.
yeah. So God starts off as being this person who can't change his mind or won't, and then at times he does. And so there are literal contradictions around like how God behaves and what God wants from us. And then we evolve from a sacrificial system into like this radical like God of grace and love, and now it's about faith, and there's this journey, and there are contradictions, and evangelicalism wants to claim that those things don't exist. You're just not reading it correctly, and you're like, oh God, that's anyway. So I
Oh
don't see
God,
this.
literally, yeah.
So I see when it comes to like what I actually do care about and value about the Bible, I think the people who wrote down what they did it in their most sincerest efforts. Like they genuinely believe what they were saying, and they were
From their
doing the
model of the
best they
world, right? From their
yeah,
literal
based on what they
model of the
understood, they
world.
were like
Yeah.
genuinely trying to help. And so I can appreciate that. And I can also still have reverence for some of these fascinating considerations they were having at the time they were having them. And I appreciate that there was a continued dialogue around like the nature of the divine and how are they involved in our world and do they care and what is their goal? What is their will? What do they want with us? And what is our involvement? Like, I think that's really important stuff to talk about still. And so moving forward, getting toward the New Testament, those ideas start to change in a pretty radical way. And I think that we had seen some progress by that point. By the time Jesus and then Paul show up on the scene and they start talking about like how the kingdom works, like there's some great ideas there that were not in the Old Testament. But then there's also a lot of terrible ideas still in the New Testament that if Paul were alive today and he were educated like an average person is on the nature of the universe we live in, right? And just like on cosmology and geography and sociology and psychology and sexuality, like if he just got educated on a base level of what we know now, biology, like he would not say the things he said in his letters. He would change them now because he would know better now.
The world's
And
different now. His view of the
right,
world would be different. So yeah, I can imagine a whole lot of the stuff would be written if it was written today, you know?
right. Like if yeah, and evangelicals would say that that's not true. They would disagree with that, which blows my mind. So I don't see this collection of writings as a manual on how life is supposed to be lived. I see it as a collection of journal entries from a community of people who continued to record their thoughts and ideas about God. It's not God's voice to us about themselves. It's our ancestors' voices about God written in the text as if God were speaking, which I can appreciate. Like if we understand that, like this is actually like a fascinating work. When you turn this into this, like larger than life, supernatural, divine being communicating through all these people, writing down these things that they want to have happen in the world, it's incredibly harmful to all kinds of people groups. And that is not the nature of this God that we see. Anyway, so I see this book, this collection of writings as old ideas from people at an earlier iteration of our species wrestling through questions of ethics and divinity and spirituality and faith and cosmology. Like fascinating, good to know. Let's build on it. Let's use it to do better and to further the flourishing and well-being of mankind, not as a cage and a leash and a reductionistic like trap that doesn't let us move forward and like create an even more hospitable environment for all kinds of people that exist in our race. Like, so yeah, there's a lot of interpretation that needs to happen, a lot of like practical application, exegesis, like there's a lot of work that goes into it. And if we're not willing to do it, I'm like, that's fine. Don't be a biblical scholar, but then also don't use the book as a reason to justify your own ignorance and bigotry in the world. Like, let's at least have the humility to not do that.
And continue to groom other young people and condition them to the word of this one thing instead of really like allowing people to open up and make their own interpretation of what their faith is, their beliefs are, and allow people to think for themselves, which I guess is probably why they don't like this, because they don't want people to think for themselves because they can't control them.
Right. We'd have to give up the whole, yeah. So, and that's my answer. I know it's a lot and there's more I would say, but that's the gist. Like, yeah.
No, I get it. I hear you. And like one of the things that I, see you on social media doing is you have a lot of people, I guess what you would call evangelicals, coming back at you with some of the things that you believe in and what you say. And I love that you share a lot of the stuff. Well, probably not a lot. You probably get a hell of a lot more, but you share some of the stuff on your social media, the conversations that you have. So Talk to me about some of the backlash that you get and the way that you handle a lot of it, because I like the way that you don't just some people would just be like, oh, I don't want to respond to this, but I find that you choose to respond from a place of like, you know, like you're wanting to maybe have them question themselves or their beliefs, right?
Yeah. So part of the reason I do this is because it came out of a necessary it's part of how I alchemized the toxicity I was facing when I came out publicly. When I came out in like to the public in 2022, it was a nightmare. People were horrible. Like I had never been told I was demon possessed or worshiping Satan or a pedophile or a false prophet or all these like, you know, really intense statements from evangelicals. And I had never been told any of that until I came out. And then all of a sudden, like on a dime, I'm this horrific, evil being in the world. Um, it was shocking and like it was a lot. And so for any one human being to be told repeatedly, like for days upon days upon days in a row, like multiple times a day, that you're evil, you're nasty, you're, you know, whatever, all this stuff.
All of that stuff, yeah.
That like just it's not good to ingest that information targeted at you, right? And so I started noticing like this is like overwhelming and really intense. And if I don't change how I'm managing this, I'm gonna drown. Like I'll jump off Instagram, whatever. And I didn't want to give up. I didn't want to just quit and throw in the towel and like just abandon this space that I'd curated and like cared so much about to bigots and haters. Like I was like, I'm not gonna just give up. So what am I gonna do? So then I started just like kind of screen grabbing some of this stuff and using it as teaching tools, not arguing with the bigot themselves, but letting their voice be represented and then confronting it and providing commentary and like
Conversation about it. Yeah.
trying to detoxify specifically for the other queer kids still trapped in evangelicalism who are terrified of being talked to like this, of being treated this way. I was like, okay, it's happening to me. Let's use this as an opportunity to blow a hole through this journey and hopefully create an easier path for people who are following me to find a way out of this horrific community that they're trapped in because they don't know any better. These people are assholes. And we've got to figure out a way to overcome this nightmare of a community who will punish you and beat you up in order to keep you compliant. Like that is not love. That is not community. It's a nightmare. So I just started like sharing this stuff publicly to help give myself an opportunity to respond and to like get some closure on some of these horrible things I was experiencing. So I picked the ones that I think were either the most extreme or the most constructive in terms of like, you know, providing examples. There, like you said, there are so many messages I don't show because it's just the volume is just too many. But the ones that I thought might be helpful or like unique or eye-opening, I use as like teaching tools. And then from there, it started becoming like a constructive, like people are actually like learning and asking questions, and it caused people to engage even more. I think it started opening up people's eyes who were not queer to realize what kind of stuff people like me are having to experience, or what kind of stuff is under like in the background that comes out the moment someone like me chooses to stop apologizing for being who I am, to stop bowing to the ring or to the, you know, the power of white patriarchy that uses Jesus to continue to subjugate people. Like when I stopped apologizing and stopped bowing and kissing the ring, that's when all the fangs came out. And I was like, look, we should look at this. Like, I don't know if people in evangelicalism are doing well. Like, this is not a great response. Like, this is not exactly like a value of freedom that supposedly the kingdom embodies. Like, people in the evangelical church don't seem to align with that. So then I started like really appreciating getting to educate people and like open people's eyes and humanize this experience and like help people recognize like I'm a person and I'm being treated this way and this is unbelievable, right? And so I think, and I've gotten a lot of amazing messages over the last couple of years of people being like, wow, I didn't know this. You opened my mind. You changed my mind. Like I didn't realize whatever. And then people are changing their minds. I'm like, that's amazing. That feels like
you're
really
hoping to be able to do, right?
Yeah, like really valuable, meaningful work that like the queer community could benefit from, obviously, but then also people who are just victims themselves of this stuff they've never had to question. Now they're getting to watch me go through this and they're like, oh God, if I were receiving those messages or if my kid was being treated this way, what would I do? Right. And it's like some of them have like entered in and it's been amazing. So anyway, it kind of started from there and now it's just become like part of the work that I do, you know?
Part of the work that you do and part of the stuff that you shared, open the conversation up and share like, and I think it's good because you're able to show both sides of a real reality of these people, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I guess there's like a documentarian in me. I think I've been that way most of my life when it comes to teaching. I find examples, like actual examples, to be really helpful because then I'm not just being told what to think or what to look at. I'm being given an opportunity to assess the thing that's being looked at from my perspective and from my own limits and like priorities. I get to come to my own conclusions, and it's really empowering. So I think I try to be as like accurate in my documenting as I can be to like give people the opportunity to draw their own conclusions and like be free. But then I also provide my commentary because a lot of queer people have told me they didn't realize they were allowed to say no to some of this. They didn't realize they could, like change the dynamics of like how they're being treated because they just watch me have boundaries. Like, I didn't know I could do that. And I'm like, oh my God, you can have boundaries. You can say no. You don't have to be treated like a piece of crap.
Shit, yeah.
Yeah, right. Like you don't have to say yes to that. Like you don't owe them a bludgeoned existence in order for you to like participate. Anyway, so yeah, there's been so much great stuff that's come out of it, that it just continues to be a compelling teaching tool.
I love that. And so, as you said, a lot of the people that you help are part of the queer community. Maybe share with us some of the key things that people come to you and have questions about, and some of the areas that you support them with, because I know that you have a couple of different organizations that you have. Like, talk about some, like I said, what people come to you about, and then like how you help them
Yeah.
to deconstruct their views, whatever part of the journey they're on, the very beginning, somewhere close to you, like there's a
Yeah.
whole layer that took you from where you were at the start to where you are now, right? And it's
Totally.
still
It
going
is.
to evolve,
Right, totally. It is a journey for everyone who's willing to like hold their beliefs accountable. And so I've like had to develop the sophistication, hopefully, to like hold space for the new boxes people are grabbing onto that I still am like, that's not accurate. It's not true, but it's better than what you were thinking. Like, let me just give you some space and like permission to be there, and that's okay. And so, yeah, I've created some like spaces for people to go on this journey. I have a group on Wednesday nights I meet with. It's called the Rainbow Room. It's exclusively for queer people. But the people who come there are like they have evangelicalism as their background. They're queer, and so then it's a space where they get to process and share in real time, like actively, like what they're working through with their boundaries, with their homophobic evangelical family and friends, and like their own love lives and dating and coming out for the first time, whatever. It's like a range of people there, right? So that's a space that I hold every week for queer people coming from evangelicalism to like process through all that. I have a book club that I'm hosting right now that's specifically geared toward like crash course first steps in deconstructing hell, the Bible, Christianity, and then the Bible even more intensely. Like that's the
Wow.
journey we're going on. We just started a couple weeks ago, but yeah, and then we have another group called Ashes, that someone on my team hosts, and that's for people who are just like processing through the tenets of evangelical faith that they've had to pull apart and confront, and so they've been on their own other journey, and that's been going on for over a year. And then I do coaching, and so I work with people on an individual basis. Most of them are queer. They're not all queer, but most of them are queer
Most of them are queer.
and processing through. Most of them are queer and have evangelicalism as their background, and so they're trying to like in their own internal beliefs, in their love lives, with their families, like they're trying to work out like, what do I believe? What can I do? What does it look like to move forward? How do I like step into my future in a way that's like aligned with my values, but still honest and, like not throwing everything away. Like it's work, right? So I work with them in a more like involved basis. So those are the spaces. And then obviously I create content. So I have a podcast and an
Of
email
course. Yeah.
and then social media. So I'm putting content out like that, to hopefully like educate and give people resources. So it's all those things. And I have not said this publicly anywhere. So yay, this will be the first time.
Ooh, exclusive.
Yeah, hey, I am currently putting together the initial steps to eventually publish maybe starting as an ebook, maybe an actual physical book. And I don't have a title or I don't even know how to talk about it yet, but like I want to basically showcase some of what we were just talking about, like literally putting screenshots of the things that have come against me over the last couple of years. Like, because there's like 13 repeated, tired arguments that evangelicals have to dehumanize queer people, and the Bible is just like some of them. But it's the same stuff over and over again in just different packages. So I just basically want to showcase, like, I'm gonna basically be cataloging all of the screenshots I've taken from the last 2.5 years of doing this work, and then identifying some very strong patterns and themes, pulling the fangs out of this stuff and just giving people a map, like, and then it'll hopefully be like a playbook, right? Just like a guide that if they get one of these messages, they can find it in one of the 13 things. And then there's going to be all these examples and other iterations. And then my
Okay.
response to that and just de-weaponizing this stuff. This feels like a lot to undertake, so I don't want to like promise I'm doing it, but I'm currently like doing the first steps of putting that together. So
I love
anyway,
that.
that's my answer.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I think that it's people who are going through what I went through. I wish that existed. That would have been
And there are
incredibly.
plenty of people out there, countless amount of people who are going through what you've gone through on their journey, or struggling to maybe, like I said, internalize, afraid to take that step. And maybe this will help that person take that step. And that's really
Yeah, I hope
important.
so.
Have stuff
Yeah, I
out,
hope so.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
What's your view on sexuality and gender from this place that you're in right now, compared to, of course, it's evolved, right? How do you see sexuality and gender in the world that we live in today?
There's another audacious question. I love it. I think the human race is a diverse species. I think that we've got a lot of spectrums on what human is, and socially, we've had a really dominant narrative, which came with boxes and requirements and measurements, and that those boxes and requirements have evolved and changed so many times over the centuries, right? It's a social construct. So when it comes to sexuality, I think there's all kinds of ways that people's sexuality presents itself. And I think as a free egalitarian society, people should be free to be honest about their experience and not be punished or shamed for having it. I think there should be room and protections and support for people to be authentically themselves. I know that sounds crazy, but like I think that's where this should all go. It's where we should have been by now. And so I don't really care like how people's sexual orientations like present themselves in them. Like what I care about is the dignity and freedom that people deserve to be on that journey and to express it and to pursue
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
express them, yeah. So that matters. And then when it comes to gender, like same thing, like we've had these neat little boxes. I don't know if that's accurate to what a human being is. I don't think that that's true. So I think the responsible like next step to the understanding we're gaining now, especially with biology and sociology and whatever, like maybe we should tear down the boxes instead of the humans that don't fit in them. Like
Agree.
maybe we should like address the
Yeah.
systems and the idea, the ethos behind this rather than letting people be the scar we just continue to wear to justify the way things used to be. Like we have to, this is going to go away. Like, why are we not, being constructive and intentional and like jumping ahead and like caring for the bodies that are demonstrating to us this isn't it? Like, why don't we learn from our own? Anyway, so I want people to be free. I want them to have the opportunities and the privileges and the protections that straight white people have had for so long. I feel like every human being deserves those things.
Agree.
And we should do the work to creating that reality for everybody.
And I love that. And I love the idea of tearing down the boxes instead of the people that don't fit into your box.
Totally. Same. I love that.
Yeah. Mm. Awesome.
Yeah.
One final question for you. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there listening to this who are, at different parts of their journey. Maybe let's talk to some of the people who are like really in a place where you were a number of years ago, really scared, afraid to show any part of who you are as a queer person. What is one message that you can say to those people that maybe can help them like with where they're at right now?
They're queer.
Yeah, and they're queer. Yeah, the queer people out there struggling with their identity in a place where, they feel inside it, but they're repressing themselves. They're oppressing themselves. They might be coming from a very religious background where they're afraid to say anything to anyone because, again, they're going to be teared down because they don't fit into the box.
Yeah. Okay, I'm about to answer. I'm like, oh God, am I going to cry? I might cry.
Go for it if you need to.
But if I say I'm going to cry, then I don't. So what? So what I would say to that person is, because that was me. Firstly, let me just acknowledge for you, because you're not going to know this right now, the only person who's going to pay for however long this is going to take, if it ever happens, for you to live authentically is you. You are the one who's going to pay for that. And you're paying for it with years of your life. And in those years the vitality that you were allowed to have. And there was a level of humanizing and liberation and expression that I experienced on the other side of coming out that I did not know I was missing out on. I didn't know I was capable of those things. I didn't realize I was living in such a subjugated existence until after I came out. I had enough reason on the other when I was in the closet to come out, but when I did come out on the other side, I got to breathe easier and I became more and more aware of the ways that I was living subpar to what everyone else around me had been enjoying this whole time. I'd been playing, this sport of life with my arms tied behind my back and a blindfold on, and coming out kind of removes those things in some ways, if you will, emotionally for yourself. And it's a game changer. So I would say to you, like, I understand we all have contexts that threaten and challenge the idea of us being authentically ourselves. There's all these systems and there's culture and there's theology that will punish us for being honest. And I want to say to you, your humanity is worth whatever price you're going to pay to finally stand in solidarity with yourself. I know you want people to advocate for you in the world, and you deserve that, but that may or may not happen in your context. What can happen is you can advocate for you. And in reality, you deserve that from you. You have owed that to yourself for a long time. And if you're hearing this now and you're hearing it at a time when you're ready to do something about this, if you're feeling the terror because I'm like speaking and the tremors are coming, like, pay attention. There's a little kid inside of you who has been dehumanized and tortured and silenced and erased for so long, and they deserve freedom. They deserve to be happy. They deserve to express themselves. They deserve to fall in love. They deserve to feel and experience and receive all of the affection and connection that's actually going on all around them all the time that they can't connect to because they're so hardened and closed off. They deserve better than that. So, yes, it's going to suck, probably. It's going to come with cost. That's all true. But you are bigger than whatever cost this world can throw at you, and you deserve the freedom and the wholeness that comes with it. So whatever you need to do to find your way there, I'm like, baby, do it. You deserve it. There are lots of resources out there. And I'm not just talking with me. I have offered so many, I think, great resources, but there are so many people in the world doing great stuff for people like us. Start or continue or accelerate the journey of finding the way to speak your truth in your life. You deserve it.
I don't have anything else to say to that, because that was just beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing that, Mike. And thank you so much for coming on here and having this conversation today. I believe it's going to be something that so many people out there listening can relate to, but also can take so much from. So I want to honor you for sharing that and being so vulnerable and just answering all of my random questions with absolute grace and humility. So thank you so much for that, Mike.
Yeah, Cristiano, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here, and I've appreciated the kinds of questions you've asked. Like, this has been a really fun and exposing experience, and I've loved it.
Awesome. Well, Mike, where can people find you and connect with you who want to find out more, or maybe want to, actually learn more from you?
Yeah. Instagram is a great place. My handle is at Mike Maeshiro. I have a website. It's mikemaeshiro.com. And I have a podcast. I've got coaching, I've got resources, lots of great free content. Probably those places are the best. My website, Instagram. Yeah.
Perfect. And I'll get those off you. I've got most of them anyway, and I can link them in the comments below. So you can look below here if you're wanting to click easily to find Mike.
Right. Love it. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Mike. And for everyone out there, it's been a pleasure having this conversation. Feel free to share your comments, your questions, your shares with me or with Mike. I'm sure he'll be happy to answer anything from you. And I'll be back next week with another episode of the Queer Quest podcast. Bye for now.
Are you ready to embark on a transformative journey towards love and happiness? Introducing the 21-day Gay Man's Guide to Love and Happiness. This isn't just a course, it's a pathway to discovering your true self, overcoming challenges, and embracing happiness. Join hundreds of gay men who found joy and freedom. Learn from Cristiano Green, a coach with 20 years experience and a journey like yours. For a limited time, get this life-changing course at 75% off with a 100% risk-free guarantee. There's nothing to lose, but so much to gain. Your new life is just a click away. Enroll in the 21-day Gay Man's Guide to Love and Happiness today. Visit theglobalpridecollective.com and start your journey towards a happier, more fulfilled you.